Morning, folks. Welcome to Good Morning Cannabis. And I have a good friend of mine on the line today, Warren Harasz. And is that really the way to pronounce your name, Warren Harasz?
Yes, sir. That's what my family has always told me. So they could be wrong. It's been a little ways removed from Hungary. So
Well, I have to tell you, I'm already liking you because at least you have long hair. And you're not the only person who gets made fun of. Around here, people have asked me why my hair is growing out, and I said to make room for my braids. I'm sure that's not the case for you. But anyway, Warren, why don't you give us a little bit about your background? Because there's some very specific questions that I have for you today, but kind of start about how you got into the cannabis space. And really, I know that you're in the compliance area right now, but how did you morph into that? And we'll go into some more questions from there.
that's actually a really great question. So I began as a cultivator at Florida State in Tallahassee, supporting my way through graduate school. I pretty much realized that I was both a pretty talented academic, decent cultivator at the same time. So I green rushed and I head out west to the Bay Area. I'm currently all but dissertation on my PhD from the GTU, the Graduate Theological Union at Berkeley. My studies are in art and religion. And again, like I was doing in Florida, I was supporting myself on a boutique cannabis farm in Sonoma County, producing about 120 to 200 pounds a year of light dep and greenhouse flower. I did start into compliance, sort of dip my toe in even back then with just the medical scene and databases, right? Creating patient databases, collecting recommendations, making sure that my farm had all of the patients in line to account for the plant count that we were running. And then I got picked up by Big Island in Hawaii. There's 60,000 square foot vertically integrated license on the Big Island of Hawaii. I started as a cultivation consultant, but they quickly realized that with my education that they could really use me for some other things. So they slapped me down with a binder of HAR 11850 and told me that they needed an entire worth of SOPs. And I cranked for several weeks until we did the entire licenses SOPs. So retail, cultivation, dispensary, delivery, you name it, it was all involved. So that's kind of how I got my background in compliance. And then while I was there, I did a number of employee handbooks, training seminars, again, just sort of using that college professor background to sort of, help out the common cannabis worker and to get the facility up and running past startup.
So let me throw this first question at you. Based upon your experience in the other states and knowing a little bit that you know right now about New Jersey and New York, when the licenses are actually awarded and people are actually then functioning as businesses, what do you think are going to be some of the major hangups that they're going to face from a compliance perspective? Or is there not going to be any problems whatsoever? I mean, how does it normally go when a state opens up?
Right. So usually what I tell people is your first compliance document is your business license application, right? So don't make any promises to the state that you do not intend to keep. So if on your environmental impact plan you say we're going to mitigate my cultivation facilities, power use via solar panel, when the inspectors come through, there better be a solar panel there. So more to your point, once people are in startup, they've been awarded that license, really it's all about facility inspections, right? This is where they start to scrutinize your SOPs. This is where your workflows become important. And of course, just the standard safety features that almost any commercial facility would need. So for instance, in a cultivation facility, you're using greenhouse gases space. You have to have all of the alarms and sensors in place, including some OSHA standards to ensure that people are safe working in that high CO2 environment. The same would go for lighting, right? Those agricultural lights can actually damage a cultivation worker's eyes. You have to have appropriate eye protection, clothing to wear to prevent mold and mildew from getting introduced to the cultivate. And so what I would say is it's different for each business model as to what those compliance needs are going to be. So retail, of course, it's going to be patient verification, age age requirements and purchase limits. So yeah, once you get up and running, it's really about creating forms and documents and just ensuring that it all matches your S flow. And it's really a lot of writing and document creation.
Gotcha. Do you see, you're looking out into the future based upon your experience in the past, do you see any particular type of cannabis business being more successful than any other? In other words, if you're looking at the cultivation, you're looking at manufacturing, lab testing, and retail, are there some that are more complex that, based upon the regulations, the way they've been written, is that, I guess the what I'm trying to express is there some area that's easier to get into than not when it comes to compliance?
So I would say retail is probably the easiest just because most business owners without a cannabis background usually have some understanding of how that business model runs. And then from there, it's, you can have tech solutions that can check, customer ages and ensure that purchase limits aren't exceeded. So that's actually pretty simple. Cultivation, that's my bread and butter. You really do have to have some sort of expert cultivator on your to ensure the quality of your harvest, and to just make sure that you're doing everything above board to have that really high quality crop. The hardest to enter into would probably be manufacturing, Todd. And that's just because of the learning curve, right? Like you're dealing with lab equipment, laboratory processes. And I mean, there are a lot of different ways to skin the cat in that business model. You could go solventless and do all, cold water hash and rosin. But when you start moving into distillate, hydrocarbon extraction, you need class 1 division 1 rooms, you need fume hoods, you need personal protective gear. There are short-term exposure limits from OSHA. It gets rapidly more complicated, and sort of having that background in, either a chemical industry or some manufacturing, those are going to be the applicants that really can demonstrate that they know how to run this business.
So based upon what you're seeing from doing, because you're doing a lot of the applications, right? This is your time to plug the company you work for.
Right, yeah. So basically, just with my background from working in Hawaii and developing their cultivation facility and their manufacturing, including their retail dispensary, this is something where we're really well geared to help somebody in a startup position figure out the ins and outs, how to enter into what background they might actually need, and where they need to really expand their executive background and maybe add somebody onto the team in the capacity of, a contract services agreement with a consultant, somebody similar to our firm, or just with another executive that, maybe you pick somebody up who happens to be a master cultivator or somebody that has the chemistry and biochemistry background that you would need.
So I've been asking this question of different guests on the podcast. Since you have the experience from the West Coast, what do you think? What lessons do you think the East Coast, that's now exploding or will explode in the cannabis industry, can learn from what's taken place in the West Coast, both good and bad? Tell me a little bit about your perspective on that.
So just looking into my crystal ball, the big thing in Hawaii that I learned was that just like New Jersey, just like New York, there's a lot of concern over the children eating edibles, right? Like, will somebody please think about the children? And of course, the patients get really upset about this because it is such a vital modality of medication for them that they absolutely can't have legal cannabis and not have access to this form of medicine. So it took about 18 months of lobbying, but as you well know, Todd, this can sometimes account for 30% or more of a retail dispensary's business. Process manufacturers, they're going to be in a race to set up commercial kitchens and start meeting that demand. It's a pretty big slice of the market, and that's one where I'm sure that New Jersey will follow in suit. You can't have a cannabis market without edibles. other experiences from out west, I would say um, think about what your impact is going to be. Think about what need that you're going to fill. It's really, there's so many different entry points into this industry that you can always expand as long as you're hitting that quality mark, and you have something better than everyone else. So look at Trulieve in Florida. They beat the rest of the market to hydrocarbon extracts, and they've been selling diamonds and sauce for $90 a gram. And just they've seized all of the market share. They're currently pushing $1 billion a year and Florida, I don't even think 40% of all of our cannabis sales are happening in the legal market. So it's a majorly untapped market. There's a ton of room for growth, but that is a really instructive lesson in how they produce something that no one else had at the time. And then all of the market, they had nowhere else to go to get it.
So when you're looking at the different companies that are startups right now and comparing it to what's happened in the past in the West Coast, what are the major deficiencies as far as what causes a company to fail within the first few years? I mean, what are they lacking? I think you've mentioned a few things, but what are the critical things, Warren, that they need to make sure they have in place?
So really one of the biggest is drive. It sounds so silly, but that executive drive to push through any obstacle, to work with whoever you have to work with, to ensure that your company's success is going to make it. The ones that really bleed and stay up all night, pulling their hair out, trying to get this stuff done, they're the ones that really tend to thrive in this industry. From there, it's about being really clean and people-centered. And when I say clean, I mean, keeping good relationships, keeping good networks so that you just don't have a whole series of people that you've burned that are all immediately turning around and saying, they might produce a good product, but they're completely unethical. The cannabis industry, we tend to care about that a lot more. I mean, look at our legislation, social equity, disabled veterans. We're really trying to lift up and be leaders for countries that you don't see this in alcohol or in food and beverage. So
that's great. So after you finish all these different applications and that you're working on, and you do all 50 states, what are you going to do, Warren?
Boy, that's a great question. So, I mean, these applications, they tend to come in waves, right? As we all know, as each state opens up. What I would say is I'm going to keep moving into the consulting space, right? The way I do it is a lot like how I did it as I don't want to be beholden to you and sort of, tied to you at the hip for the entire time of your company's running. What I want is to teach you how to set up something very successful. And then, of course, if you need somebody smart to come in and look over what you've done, give you, professional feedback and ideas on how to tweak efficiency, that's a great place where we can help. And this is where I'm always happy to work with the accountants, because you guys know these projects balloon out of control so quickly. And if you don't have a really strong sense of cost, where your dollars are going out and how they're going to come back in, that for sure can be something that's a major hindrance to these companies.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of concern about many of these folks who are looking to get the license. They don't really realize how much money it's going to cost to actually start building out whatever it may be, the retail facility or the grow, and some very well intentioned people, but they're just kind of they're a little bit lost. Have you ever turned away a client? How's that for a question? And if so, why?
Yes, we have, mostly because we're getting so busy at this point, so that we do have to do a little vetting, make sure that these people have the best chance. So for instance, in New Jersey, I'm a great application writer, but I your municipal verification form for you. Only the mayor can do that. So if I get somebody coming in and they are just not prepared, they do not have that relationship with the municipality, I could always push forward on a conditional application for them so that they could start getting their feet in the door and try to get their ducks in a row and, eventually accomplish that full license. But really, the clients that we want to write for have that very tight relationship with the municipality they're operating in.
Gotcha. So you do turn people away from time to time.
If we're too busy and if we think that it's going to mostly be a waste of their time, when if they could spend a month or two going to city council meetings and actually, emailing and shaking some hands, then they might have something substantial to where, Mayor so-and-so from this municipality says, I think you've got a great business. And by the way, let's write you that verification form. That's seriously the most important part of any application, because of the way New Jersey has structured its applications. So again, I can write you a wonderful compliant application that'll score highly according to the scoring criteria. Without that one piece, you're dead in the water almost.
One other question that comes to mind is your opinion. When do you think cannabis THC beverages will be allowed into the state? And are they under the regulations right now permitted? I mean, once that you get the license.
Right. So New York is already looking ahead at producing these sorts, and I believe Connecticut is too. Usually when you have other markets right nearby, it does apply pressure. So I would say likely New Jersey will have the beverages around the same time as the whole edible scene comes in, because it's just food and beverage manufacturing. If you have the commercial kitchen, ISO 9000, ISO 9001, you should be completely set up and ready to run.
Gotcha. So Warren, I think that you've answered all my questions. Any last remaining thoughts to the folks who are listening in, many of whom are applying, some are already in the cannabis world, as far as a recommendation, it's a suggestion to be successful in getting the license?
So it's hard to know as a business owner in the startup what you know and what you don't know. So definitely set up some calls, either get a reputable cannabis attorney, get a consulting firm like we are at CannaSpire, and then from there team up with your accountants, right? Because
Right.
at the end of the day, before you even go and approach investors, you want as tight of a pro forma model for that accounting as possible. And the better setup it's going to be, the more likely it is that these investors are going to be willing to jump onto your project.
Great advice. So with that, Warren, we're going to say goodbye and thank you so much for coming and speaking to us at Good Morning Cannabis. Have a great day.
Todd, it's such a pleasure. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Enjoy the beautiful sun, and you're in Florida right now, right?
That's correct. Cocoa Beach, Florida, sir.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm coming to visit you, certainly. So
That's it. Come on down.